Good evening. Welcome to the Development Management Committee. I'm Councillor Kieran Bowker, the Chair of the committee. Before we start the meeting, I need to make the public aware of the following. We're not expecting a fire drill, so if you hear the fire alarm sound, please make your way out of the nearest fire exit and gather in front of Runnymede Hall. Meetings of the webcast of the committee are webcast and broadcast on the internet. If you're seated in the public gallery, it's possible that your image may be used in that broadcast. And lastly, could I ask everyone present to switch their phones to silent? Thank you very much. May I ask the Development Management Committee members present who are seated in the chamber in the row in front of me to introduce themselves, stating their names only, starting on my left.
Good evening, my name's Councillor Peter Gregg. I'm the Vice Chairman of this committee.
Good evening, I'm Councillor Alan Acott.
Good evening, I'm Councillor Carol Sage.
Good evening, I'm Councillor Grace Watson.
Good evening all, Councillor Rob Lillis.
Good evening, Councillor Gareth Howlett.
Good evening everyone, Councillor Russ Savage.
Councillor Jackie Thornton.
And good evening, Councillor Tom Skip.
Thank you, councillors. May I ask the officers present to introduce themselves, again, starting on my left.
Good evening, I'm Planning Officer James Whitby.
Keith Zammit, Planning Officer.
Good evening, I'm Stephen Garner, the Assistant Director for Development Services.
Good evening, Sonia Worthington, Democratic Services Manager.
Good evening, David Bland, Legal Advisor to the committee.
Thank you. And may I ask any other members present to introduce themselves?
Good evening, Councillor Andrew Thornton.
Good evening, Councillor Michael Dearson.
Good evening, Councillor John Knott.
Good evening, Councillor Tom Gibson.
Good evening, Councillor Dana Jones.
Good evening, Councillor Michael Fuller, substitute member for this committee but not sitting on this committee this evening.
Thank you, councillors. The first item on the agenda is apologies. Are there any apologies for absence?
There are none, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Item 2 is members' interests. Are there any interests to declare, members? Item 4 is public speakers. For item 5, land at Brook Farm, Daws, Heath Road, Hadleigh, Miss Amy Harbinson will speak in objection. Mr Matthew Wood will speak in support. For item 6, 179 to 195 Church Road, Thundersley, Mr Alan Green will speak in support. Item 5 is land at Brook Farm, Daws, Heath Road, Hadleigh. I'll now hand over to the planning officer to present this item.
Thank you very much, Chairman. So, as the Chairman said, this item is at Brook Farm, Daws Heath Road, and the application before you this evening is to construct 173 dwellings, including public open space, landscaping, the access, drainage, parking, services, utilities, and other associated infrastructure and ancillary buildings. So this is a major application that's being presented to the Development Management Committee this evening because it is considered to be of sufficient scale to warrant full consideration by the committee. I think it's important to note, given the run of previous applications for major sites that we've had, that the previous sites that have come before committee have been outline applications, so those are where only certain aspects of the development are up for consideration. However, this is a full application with all details able to be considered this evening. So that's the difference between this and other previous applications that have recently been presented to the committee. Now, I won't read the report in full. It is quite a lengthy report. I'm sorry that you've all had to read it this evening. However, I'll be highlighting the key points for consideration, and I'll be happy to answer any questions from members about the proposal in sections where I maybe don't go quite so in depth. So, this is the site itself here. It's about 18.9 hectares and is located broadly to the southeast of Daws Heath settlement, which is here, and is to the west of Daws Heath Road, located down here, and you've got the old Daws Heath Road, which runs down here. You've got, to the north of it, you've got Fairmead Avenue and Haresland Close, and you've got Bramble Road running along here, and then further to the south, you've got the settlement of Hadleigh, where it begins. You can sort of see the houses starting there. So this aerial shows a bit of a wider shot of the area. You can see it's an open an open area of fields, the majority of which are either used for the grazing of horses, paddocks, or the growing of hay to feed the horses. And you've got some farm buildings here, and there's also a caravan storage area here as well. This is just to give an indication. There's a few shipping containers used for storage. You've got caravan storage and also farm buildings as well. And then moving on to the next slide, we've got some pictures of further into the site where you've got a track that runs broadly through the middle of the site going from west to east, and you've got a number of different areas that are fenced off or got hedgerows that divide it into paddocks and fields. You've also got the access to the site, which is accessed off of Daws Heath Road via this little turning here, which is located just here as well. So looking at the site in the context of the wider area, you've got the settlement of Daws Heath here, you've got the Woodman's Junction up here, and the Hadleigh roundabout here, and you've got Hadleigh broadly down here. You've got Poundwood Nature Reserve to the north of the site here, and you've got the Greatwood and Dodds Grove Triple SI to the south, and you've also got Garrel's Meadow Triple SI up here to the north of the site as well. So, as I've already stated, full planning consent is sought for the construction of 173 dwellings, including public open space, landscaping, access, drainage and other ancillary buildings. So if I move on now to the proposal for the site, you can see that the development broadly covers the western and northern extents of the site, and that is where the sort of built form would be located. Around about here is where the existing sort of farm and caravan storage uses are located, and the rest of this open space would be various different types of public open space, wildflower meadows, attenuation ponds for drainage, and a children's play area is also proposed as part of the proposal. So of the 173 dwellings, 40% of those, so 69, are proposed to be affordable. The proposal also includes the extensive infrastructure provision with an extensive infrastructure for surface water drainage with surface water attenuation ponds here, 10 hectares of public open space, children's play area, orchard, meadow, wetland, and informal open space for walking and riding. Extensive planting is also proposed to maintain and enhance the ecological linkages between Poundwood to the north of the site, which is located broadly up here, and then also Greatwood and Dodds Grove to the south of the site, which are down here. So moving on, you can see this plan here shows the proposed heights of the development, where you've got darker purple buildings such as here. These are proposed to be 2.5 stories, which are dwellings where they've got an additional floor within the roof space. The green coloured buildings are what I'd call your traditional 2-storey dwellings, and then these yellow buildings here are bungalows. So moving to the site layout plan, you can see a little bit clearer. Sort of, you would have a main trunk road running through the middle of the site, and that is shown in grey. And then where you've got these sort of beige or tan, sandy coloured roads, those would be shared access roads, which would be used for accessing the properties off of those. There's also proposed to be a linkage through the site to provide public, basically non-vehicular transport links all the way through from Daws Heath Road up to Bramble Road, which doesn't currently exist. Then turning to this plan, which is the landscape and open spaces strategy, you can see here that there is an extensive amount of planting and beneficial works proposed to be undertaken to the wider area in the public open space that's provided. I think it's really important to note that whilst there's a lot of news recently about the introduction of biodiversity net gain and there being a legal requirement to provide 10% net gain, that was only for major applications that were submitted after January this year. However, this application has been with us for a number of years, and from the very start, the developers have been saying we are going to provide 10% or more net gain on the site. And in that aspect, I think it's quite commendable as part of the development scheme. So there are quite a lot of drawings associated with this site. You've got various different house types that are proposed. You've got a combination of red mixed stock brick, buff and tan brick, with a combination of red and grey roof tiles in various different combinations. And they're all different house sizes, ranging from 1 beds all the way up to 4 and 5 beds, semi-detached, detached. It's quite a ranging variety on this site. So these are some further, I'll quickly flick through, but there's such a wide variety of them and they all differ slightly. So here you've got an example of some bungalows as well. These are examples of some of the 2.5 storey houses where they've got rooms in the roof served by roof lights. Again, some more examples. And the application has also provided a number of visualisations showing what the site could look like once it's actually developed. So this application was subject to public consultation, and a total of 695 objections to the proposal were received, and 2 letters of support were also received for the reasons set out in pages 11 and 12 of the report. Now, turning back to these visualisations, I know it can be easy to look at visualisation and think that's not what it's going to look like once it's actually developed. However, I just wanted to sort of highlight that Countryside are a well-known developer. They're a large developer and they are known for developing high-quality forms of development. For example, if anyone's familiar with the Wolseley Park development in Rayleigh, which I live near, these are some photos of the site after it's been built. They do develop high-quality development, so I've got strong confidence that what is proposed in those visualisations, if this were granted approval, is what would be delivered on the site. So, as I say, Countryside do deliver high quality forms of development, and this really is it's a good form of development broadly. And yes, so I think it's important to state that whilst the proposal represents a high quality form of development and infrastructure, including a large amount of public open space in an area which is not currently open to the public, the developer in the process has been exemplary in engaging with officers and has provided revisions, assessments and required documents without any fuss, working with us to bring forward the application that is here today. And this is how developers should behave, and I'd really like to thank and commend Countryside Homes for this. However, and it's a big however, this doesn't, in my opinion, outweigh the harm to the greenbelt that's set out in the report in front of you this evening. So, planning law requires that the developments be determined in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. The local plan identifies this site as greenbelt, and there are no safe policies within the local plan that seek to establish the general principles of development within the greenbelt. Therefore, our starting position is the content of the National Planning Policy Framework. As part of this assessment of the impact of the proposal on the greenbelt, officers have undertaken a comprehensive assessment of the site and how it serves its function as greenbelt. This is included in Appendix 1 of the report before you this evening. This assessment has utilised the Council's 6-stage approach to assessing applications for development in the greenbelt. This assessment template has been developed to provide a consistent and robust approach to assessing harm and benefits of development in the greenbelt, and to ensure that they're all considered and appropriately weighted. As set out in the report before you, officers and myself consider that the harm to the greenbelt amounting from its impact on the openness would be substantial, and the harm to the greenbelt purposes set out in the NPPF would range from limited to substantial. The other harm resulting from the proposal has been set out in Stage 4 of the Greenbelt Assessment Template, which identifies limited harm occurring to the ecology and biodiversity, wildlife, increased traffic, noise and disturbance, pollution, flooding and oversubscribed services, and protected sites. The NPPF clearly states that inappropriate development within the Greenbelt should not be permitted. That is, unless there are very special circumstances which outweigh that, and also that substantial weight should be given to any harm to the greenbelt. The development has been identified by officers as being inappropriate because it doesn't meet any of the exceptions contained in paragraphs 154 and 155 of the NPPF, and therefore it shouldn't be approved unless very special circumstances exist. The applicants put forward a number of factors which they consider to constitute individually and cumulatively very special circumstances. These reasons are the provision of housing defined by local needs and provided to contribute towards addressing a critical shortfall in the delivery of market and affordable housing, the provision of affordable housing, the provision of 10 hectares of public open space, the delivery of a package of ecological enhancement resulting in a net gain in biodiversity on the site, the delivery of highly sustainable housing, positive economic outcomes during the construction and operational period as a consequence of employment opportunities, an apprenticeship scheme and increased local spend, and the unique circumstances of the Castle Point local plan position and the fact that in previous iterations of this plan, the application site had been identified as suitable for release for development purposes. The benefits of the proposal have been clearly discussed within this report and are also set out in stage 5 of the assessment template. The delivery of housing and affordable housing provision have both been given substantial weight in favour of the application because there is a clearly identified affordable and market housing shortfall in the borough. Whilst the children's play space, better non-vehicular transport links, RAMS mitigation, open space provision, retention of hedgerows, enhancement of biodiversity and contribution to local employment have been given limited weight in favour. Having considered these factors, it's not considered that either on their own or cumulatively they outweigh the identified harm to the Greenbelt, particularly given the function the land is considered to serve towards the purposes of the Greenbelt, which are to check the unrestricted sprawl of large built-up areas, prevent neighbouring towns from merging into one another, safeguarding the countryside from encroachment, and to assist in urban regeneration by encouraging the recycling of derelict and other urban land. In addition to this, it's also considered that the proposed development would have substantial harm to the openness of the Greenbelt by the reason of the presence of significant amounts and volumes of built form in an area which is largely undeveloped as it currently stands. On this basis, an objection is raised to the proposal on the basis of its harm to the Greenbelt. You'll have no doubt noted from the report before you this evening that as this is a full application, considerable time has been spent in the report assessing the proposal against other policies within the local plan and the residential design guidance documents, and this is set out on pages 32 to 79 of the report before you. I'm not going to cover this in detail as the proposal broadly satisfactorily complies with the relevant policies and requirements and has been well designed and thought out. Again, I'm happy to answer any questions on this if there are any things that members wish to ask. I would highlight that if members are minded to overturn the recommendation this evening, then a large number of conditions would be required, as well as a section of local infrastructure. Furthermore, the application would need to be referred to the Secretary of State for consideration. Details of the proposed access and the proposal have been consulted on with the Highways Authority. Subject to conditions, no objections have been raised to the proposed access to the site by the Highways Authority, and officers find no defensible reason to object to the access either. The site has been identified as being located within the Benfleet and Southend Marshes, Blackwater Estuary and Foulness zones of influence for the Essex Coast Recreational Disturbance Avoidance and Mitigation Strategy, and these are referred to as RAMS. These are zones of influence for protected habitat sites, and the developer has offered to pay an appropriate RAMS contribution which would satisfactorily mitigate against the harm caused by this development to these sites. Turning now to the final planning balance, the framework sets out a presumption in favour of sustainable development. However, the site is within the Greenbelt, which is listed as a protected area under footnote 7 of the NPPF. The NPPF attaches substantial weight to any harm to the Greenbelt by reason of its inappropriateness and its harm to the character, purpose and function of the Greenbelt, which conflicts with the NPPF. Conversely, we do have an identified significant shortfall in overall market and affordable housing supply, which the development would contribute towards. The development would also provide some economic benefit in terms of temporary construction jobs and other benefits such as public open space and enhanced biodiversity as set out in stage 5 of the Greenbelt assessment. In undertaking this balancing exercise, despite the cumulative benefits of the proposal, which is for a high quality form of development, it is not concluded that these considerations clearly and definitely outweigh the combined weight of harm to the character, purpose, openness and function of the Greenbelt, and it is a requirement that those benefits clearly outweigh, not just marginally, but clearly outweigh the harm to the Greenbelt. Consequently, for this reason, it's considered that very special circumstances in order to justify approval of the development do not exist. The NPPF therefore provides a clear reason for refusing the development, and the application is therefore on this basis recommended for refusal before you this evening. Thank you very much, and I'll hand back to you, Chairman.
Thank you, Stephen. Ms Harbington, would you take your place at the lectern and microphone? Thank you very much. Just to say, Ms Harbington, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
There, isn't it? Okay, it's on. Right. Good evening, everyone. I urge you to listen to your people because the people have voted no. Oh, God, sorry. The quality of evidence relating to this application can be poor quality, superficial, plausible arguments, rather than fact-based evidence that are given in support of the application. Impact reports can descend into nonsense, including citing facts that the existing houses and traffic, meaning another 173 more houses and 700 more cars, will make a difference to the noise, dust and light pollution. There are also existing apparent reluctance by some parties to commit to raising objections. The Environment Agency have no objection to the plan and nothing to say, despite its remit to protect especially from flood risk. The Highways Department raises no objection, regardless of the site falling between the two main arteries in the area which are already clogged. Nature England and Essex Wildlife Trust have no objections, although protected and endangered species are observable on the site. There is an over-reliance on mitigation as a cure-all. Likewise, whilst the objection is inferred and contributions are sought in lieu, this adds support when none exists. Amenity in planning terms refers to the enjoyment of the area and can be applied in many arguments which are dismissed of being irrelevant. Oh God, okay. The 38 stables and horses on site are integral and a valuable part of history, and the local landscape and contributions retaining to a semi-rural area and a largely urban district. This is not a dispute. Bridle ways are rated as high value. Okay. No weight is given to the lack of schools, doctors' surgeries and hospital beds, but surely these amenities within definition. Flood risk issues, including the runoff from the site into the Brook. SUDs have proven flaws, especially in extreme weather events. Nature benefits everyone, not just those living in the borough, and should be allowed to exist on its own merits and not exploited for the site that could be a tennis court or a sports ground. Okay, I'm really sorry. I'm really nervous, so I'm going to put this. This is our home. The people have said no. We cannot have any more buildings where they are. Our horses are on that site. We have nowhere to go. This will lead to horses being put down, sold or moved across the country, because that is the fact that will be. This decision is in your hands and we all have to live within the consequences, but I do ought to say to you again, the people have voted no.
Thank you, Miss Harbington. Thank you, ladies and gents. Mr Wood, would you like to take your place at the microphone? Thank you very much. Just to say, Mr Wood, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good evening to members. As you will be aware, over the past 10 years, the site at Brook Farm has been consistently included in Castle Point's new draft local plan as a site for residential development, having been shown as an allocation in the 2014, 2016 and 2019 versions of the draft plan. Therefore, should any greenbelt in the borough be released to meet much needed local housing need, this site is considered to be as acceptable as any in greenbelt terms. It is noted that officers do not consider that very special circumstances have been demonstrated to justify such new development in the greenbelt. However, the applicant disagrees with the likely level of harm attributed to greenbelt and the level of weight to be given to the extensive range of benefits this scheme will deliver, particularly in the absence of an up-to-date local plan. The scheme itself is well designed and laid out to current standards and seeks to minimise its greenbelt impact through consolidated and well-contained built form, which is strongly complemented through the proposed new 10 hectares of public open space. This will provide good quality access to an area of greenbelt not currently publicly accessible and should be afforded significant weight in the planned balance. The delivery of major new market and affordable homes in a sustainable location in the borough with a chronic housing need attracts very significant weight. Other important benefits that would otherwise not be achieved include a 10% biodiversity net gain and very significant economic benefits towards the local economy. Although it is appreciated that there is some harm to the green belt through the introduction of new built form, it is considered that such harm, as well as any other harm resulting from the proposal, is clearly outweighed by these significant benefits demonstrated in very special circumstances. In terms of any other harm, Officers Committee report confirms that this high quality development is fully acceptable in all other planning related respects. It is important to add that Section 106 agreement would be entered into should this application be approved, along with the required seal payment. This would contribute significantly towards local infrastructure, including the NHS, education and sustainable transport, which we know are key concerns for local people. Therefore, the applicant is strongly of the view that this planning application has demonstrated the very special circumstances required to justify such new development in the Greenbelt. This really does pave the way for members to support these high quality and sustainable proposals and grant detailed planning permission accordingly. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. Ward Member for Victoria Ward, Councillor John Knott, would you like to make your statement, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for this opportunity to address the committee tonight on behalf of the residents of my ward, Victoria Ward. Members, you can see the planning officers have prepared a very detailed report for you. And without wishing to embarrass them, they're experts in these matters, and they've recommended, after a painstaking examination of all the facts, that this application should be refused. A decision that I and the 695 residents that object to these plans will applaud. Ultimately, they conclude that there are no special exceptional circumstances as required under planning law. That's crucial. No special exceptional circumstances. And that really should be the end of the matter, shouldn't it? But as we know from Councillor Edwards, who reminded us recently, I think as recently as last week, the developer's main focus is not on respecting greenbelts or the wishes of the community, represented by the people here tonight in the gallery. Their focus, their business model, is to make profit. Pure and simple. And building on greenbelt is, as far as they're concerned, easy money. It's much easier than brownfield. And the fact that the previous administration actually, unbelievably, it beggars belief, but they included this area in their local plan. And that has only encouraged and emboldened the developers, in my view. But let's be clear, that local plan has been withdrawn by this administration. It holds no weight, and you know yourselves that you cannot sort of, just the fact, as the previous speaker said, just the fact that was included in a local plan holds no weight now. It's good news, it's withdrawn, so it can be forgotten. You'll have read the details leading to the recommendation. I've very briefly, because we're limited on time, but there's a couple of points I think worth mentioning. Just, you'll have read them, but I want to just remind you. NHS and primary care services. The report you'll have read confirms that GP practices do not have the capacity to cope with the additional growth from this development. Now, arguably, they can't even cope with what they've got already. Financial contributions from the developer, which are always mentioned towards primary care, however great, will not sustain GP services over the next 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 years. It's just impossible. Transport, we heard that mentioned. The report states access to bus routes is good. The nearest bus stop, 160 metres away, and I quote from the report, providing good links to all local services. Anyone local will tell you here tonight that is pure, absolute fantasy. The bus stop right next to that site is...
Councillor Knott, if I could ask you just to sum up, please.
Okay,
Thank you.
Right. Education, 14 early year places are deemed to be required for this. There's currently only 6 available at the moment. The local infant school is confined, or is confirmed to be close to capacity already. Reception classes are full with a waiting list. Obviously, I've run out of time, but there are 2 other things I really want to say about wildlife, the badger protection. You'll have read all of this, so I can't mention it. I'm being closed down. But, members, this application is housing in the wrong place. It's an application that drives the coach and horses through the requirements of national policy framework in relation to protection of Greenbelt. We've heard that. And I, on behalf of the residents of Victoria, would ask you to reject the application, protect our Greenbelt. Yes, houses need to be built, no one denies that, but there have to be right houses in the right place.
I'm sorry, we're entering the 5th minute. Sorry. Do members have any questions for the planning officer about the planning application? Please note, this is the members' opportunity to seek clarification from the planning officer on any matters they are unclear of regarding the application. Members should refrain from making statements and they should be expressed during the debate section of the meeting. Councillor Lillis.
Thank you, Chair. Steve, why is there little or no provision of affordable housing for larger families? The report states that of the 33 4-bedroom dwellings, just 2, 6%, and of the 15 5-bedroom dwellings, none, 0%, are provided as affordable dwellings. So, are key workers with 3 or more children not welcome on this development? Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Councillor. So I believe you're referring to one of the statements in the report where it sets out that the number of affordable housing and the split there. So the split of affordable home broadly aligns with our most recent housing needs assessment, which was published in December 2023, and the one that was undertaken before that. Whilst there is a skew within the affordable housing provision towards the smaller homes, as you correctly identify, there are no affordable housing units proposed for the 5-bed dwellings that are proposed. It broadly meets the figures in the housing needs assessment, and so on that basis, looking at it pragmatically, the benefit of 69 affordable homes split across 1-beds, all the way from 1-bed flats to bungalows, all the way up to 4-bed houses, was considered to be a good provision and a good mix of provision, which is why officers haven't raised any objection to the proposal.
Councillor Savage.
Just a point of clarification, please, Stephen, if you will. I note that there's a large area of open space still to the east side towards Eastwood and Lee. What would, because this is a full application, what would stop an applicant coming in 5-10 years' time and actually building on that green space as well?
So there are a number of different routes that could be taken. Obviously, part of this scheme is proposing to provide surface water drainage with attenuation ponds on the site here. That would be required and would be pretty well protected because that would be required to serve the development that is proposed. Insofar as what would stop people coming along in the future, someone could put in a planning application. It could be written into it to protect it. It could be put in a legal agreement that the owners of the site will maintain it as public open space. It could be gifted to a public responsible body to look after it. Ultimately, at the moment, there is nothing to stop someone in the future doing it except national and local planning policy. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Chair. Steve, page 5, 4.7 refers to an 18-metre natural slope on the topography of the land. At present, much of that runoff will be absorbed by the existing vegetation. What happens when this is concreted over? And where is the stream that is referred to in 4.8? And is it a condition that this must be retained? Thank you.
So members who were on the site visit yesterday with me will recall that we saw the stream that runs down approximately in this location here. There is, I believe, a pond that's located on in the garden of this property here, and another pond on the boundary. And then there is a stream that runs down broadly along following this line and later joins up to Prittle Brook, which is along the bottom here. The proposal proposes quite an extensive and substantial surface water drainage scheme. These ponds here are evidence of that. Those are surface water attenuation ponds. Whilst there will be features throughout the year, those are predominantly for when there is heavy rain events during the winter. That is for the storage of that water above ground. That stream would continue to feed in to those, and then they would continue to. There would be mechanisms in place to ensure that the discharge from those ponds in rain events doesn't exceed acceptable levels. That's what's been agreed with the lead local flood authority. They've raised no objection to this, and neither of the Environment Agency on surface water flooding or flooding risk off-site. I believe, have I covered everything in your question there? Sorry.
Apologies. Will the ditch be retained? Is there a condition for it to be retained?
Specifically with reference to that ditch, I believe it is to be retained because it is an existing watercourse. However, that would be the specifics of the surface water drainage scheme would be secured by condition, and that could securing that retention of that could be covered by a condition.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Chair. Steve, how many badger sets have been identified on the site, and was the badger protection group consulted? Thank you.
If you just bear with me a second, I'll find the section in the report.
Page 54, Steve.
Thank you very much. So, to answer the first part of your question, the Essex Badger Protection Group were consulted as part of the proposal, and they raised an objection to the proposal on the basis that it would encroach on the badgers' homes sets. Broadly, the sets are located, and I won't disclose their exact location to protect the badgers. They're located towards the northern boundary of the site. And they have been identified in both the applicant's submitted ecology statements and also our own ecologists' reports. As part of the habitat regulation assessment that was prepared by our ecologists and submitted and approved by Natural England, it did identify that a number of badger sets, which are labelled in the ecology statements as 1, 3, 5, 6, 7, and 8, will need to be closed, including the removal of a main set. As a result of this, a badger licence will be required from Natural England to undertake these works and the set closures. Details of this would be finalised in a condition. However, the proposed landscaping and ecological benefits of the proposal are considered by our ecologists and Natural England to outweigh those concerns. And as a result, all parties involved, with the exception of the Essex Badger Protection Group, are satisfied that sufficient measures have been outlined within the development for the protection of protected species such as badgers.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? It's a bit of a one-man show tonight. Councillor Lewis.
I've even left my mic on, Chair. Thank you. Steve, page 64, paragraph 39.3. I'll let you work your way through the agenda. The report states that there is the potential for, amongst other things, asbestos and polycyclic, aromatic hydrocarbons, PAHs, to be present on the site. Can you confirm that PAHs combine to or form small particles in the air that have toxic properties and have been associated with increased risks of cancer? Thank you.
I'm not an expert in this field, so I cannot confirm or deny what you've just said. However, any asbestos would need to be removed by a specialist contractor and any contaminated land, as with any development, would need to be dealt with appropriately, and this can be secured by an appropriately worded condition, as it is in many cases with many forms of developments, so that a suitable scheme for remediation, how it's going to be dealt with, construction management plans, etc., and what to do when they find and how to deal with the contaminated land can be submitted to and approved by the council and then be implemented during the works.
Are there any other questions? The Planning Officer's recommendation is that planning permission should be refused for the reasons set out on page 81 of the report. For the purposes of debate, I move the recommendation. Councillor Gregg, as Vice Chairman, would you second the motion?
I do second the motion.
Thank you. Please note that members should only speak once during the debate section of the meeting. Who would like to speak first? Councillor Skipp.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. It's a shame this is on the, in the Green Belt because, this, as has been said previously, this is a high-quality development which provides a good mix of much-needed market housing and affordable housing. But this is not a good reason to encroach into the Green Belt. The government guidance states that the need for housing is not exceptional circumstances for using Green Belt. The provision of 10 hectares of public open space does not really improve the function of Greenbelt, as that's not a requirement to make Greenbelt work properly. So I don't think that is another thing. Although it could give extra public space, it doesn't improve the function of Greenbelt. That will function properly whether it's public open space or not. So for those reasons, I will be supporting the officer's recommendation for refusal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Skipp. Would anyone else like to speak? Councillor Thornton.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the officers for a very comprehensive report. I would like to support it entirely. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lillis.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, my thanks to Steve, as Councillor Thornton has just said, for the very detailed planning of the report and for arranging the site visit yesterday. Thanks to you for answering the many questions that I had or have submitted prior to this meeting and obviously during the meeting itself. Thanks also to Councillor John Knott for speaking with such aplomb tonight, and to the two public speakers as well. It's not easy. I found the site visit very useful yesterday. It gave me a very good feel for the proposed development site and how it will impact on the surrounding area. This is a large site. Just to help put it into perspective, I believe the site equates to approximately 26 Wembley-sized football pitches, of which I guess around 40% will be built on. But there is much about the proposed development that troubles me. Anglian Water, on page 9 of the report, state, desktop analysis has suggested that the proposed development will lead to an unacceptable risk of flooding downstream. The report itself states that the submitted flood risk and drainage strategy has been considered by the lead local flood authority and found to be broadly acceptable. That's hardly reassuring. The report also states that there are ditches and 3 ponds present on the site, with a further 10 ponds recorded within 250 metres of the site. And this tells me one thing. There must be a considerable amount of surface water and runoff from this site already, and that before huge swathes of concrete areas are concreted over. I guess the clue is in the name, Brook Farm. Essex Badger Patrol, on page 10 of the report, state that they object to the proposal, and a reminder to all those present this evening that badgers are protected by UK law. Given the number of sets on the site, I simply cannot accept the statement on page 56 that the implementation of the proposed mitigation, that the impact on the badgers will be considered neutral. Air pollution in the area is reported to be already 3 times the WHO recommendations, and don't get me started on the risk associated with the contaminated land that I touched upon earlier on this evening. By my calculation, 103 of 173, almost 60% of the proposed dwellings are, and I quote, not the requisite distance from the boundaries they face. This tells me that the developer is trying to max out the site by putting as many dwellings on it as possible. Page 40 of the report states that the northern boundary will be enclosed by close-boarded fencing where required. So much for maintaining the openness of the site. Yet again, good old Essex County Council Highways raised no objection to the proposal. Personally, having visited the site yesterday, how a single access road and junction onto Daws Heath Road is supposed to handle the large volume of traffic resulting from the proposed development, I simply do not know. Let us not forget, as the lady speaker mentioned, the list of protected and notable species found to be present on this site. These include badgers, hazel dormouse, bats, notable invertebrates, reptiles, harvest mice, common toad, polecats and hedgehogs.
Councillor
No doubt.
Lillis, could I ask you to sum up if you could?
Most certainly can.
Thank you very
Chair.
much.
Thank you. There's been a lot of talk this night of housing need. And let me just remind you what our government in April 2021 had to say about using housing need as a justification for damaging the Greenbelt. And I quote, "We should be clear that meeting housing need is never a reason to cause unacceptable harm to such places." The recommendation is for refusal, and I wholeheartedly support that recommendation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Would anyone else like to speak? Councillor Sage.
I can't ask questions, can I? Just realised that. They need to do something with the bats, because bats are also protected as well as badgers. So something needs to be done. I'm against this completely.
Thank you, ladies and gents. Would anyone else like to speak? Councillor Watson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I would just like to say to Councillor Lillis, what a wonderful, what can I call it? You've put through. Absolutely excellent. However, I would say this is probably one of the better applications we've seen come through here. But at the end of the day, it's still Greenbelt. And no way do we build on Greenbelt. This is very precious land. We need it. We need to keep it and keep it free from any development at all. So I totally support this recommendation. Thank you very much.
Councillor Watson, eventually.
Thank you, Chair. It's quite sad, really, because, in my opinion, is to support this application tonight is the start of a slippery slope for Castle Point Council. If we build any houses on that land, it's losing our parts of our Greenbelt. And we're not here to lose parts of our Greenbelt. We're here to secure our Greenbelt for our future generations, our children, our grandchildren, and those to come after. We don't want to be urbanised here, because we have beautiful land, we have beautiful places for our children to learn and play. Also, wildlife. Wildlife is important for the younger generation to learn about. It learns them how to look after them, be gentle to them, be kind to them, because that's how we bring them up. Sadly, I can't support this. I'm totally against building on that land, and I will be following the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Savage.
As with any application in the green belt. You know, when you look back at post-war town planners, they were geniuses really. They recognised that the importance of this land in terms of the one thing that really gets me is urban sprawl. And if you look to the east of that boundary, you're only a quarter of a mile from Eastwood and Leigh-on-Sea. You know, you're joining up towns again, and that for me alone is a classic example of why we shouldn't be building on this. One of my biggest fears with this particular application is the clever way, if you like, that they're putting the houses to the west side of that boundary. You know, I'm glad you mentioned Wellesley Park, Stephen, because my middle daughter's just bought a house on there, and if you looked at the photographs of those houses that she's bought, they're right on top of each other. You know, they're not as open as the ones near the playground, because I took my grandson there on Wednesday, actually, last week. The biggest fear I have, and growing up where I grew up, you see a lot of developments like this where they'll put the houses, wedge them all into one corner, and then that's open space. That's going to stay as open space. And then 5 years later, as they did in Langdon and right throughout the Basden district, they then build on that bit of land. So it's lost. And let's say, if you look at that photograph there, what are you, a quarter of a mile from Eastwood, Leigh-on-Sea boundary? You know, for me, and for that reason alone, the urban sprawl is one of the reasons why I couldn't accept that application. So I'll be going with the recommendation also.
Would anyone else like to speak? Councillor Howlett.
I'd just like to say, the one thing that's been missed by everyone so far is the stable yards. This year we've had 2 at Daws Heath. This one. You've also had 1 Great Birches. And if we allow these to go ahead, there's going to be nowhere for the horses, nowhere for the people to go and ride. It's just going to kill it. So I'll be going with the recommendation as well.
Thank you, Councillor. Would anyone else like to speak? Members, the motion before you is for refusal. May I have a show of hands, please? Those for the motion. And that's unanimous. The motion is carried and the application is refused for the reasons and informative set out in the report. Thank you. Just to say, ladies and gents, you're very welcome to stay, but should any of you wish to leave, this would be an appropriate time to do so, but please feel free. There's another 2 items. Thank you, ladies and gents. We continue. Item 6 is 179 to 195 Church Road, Thundersley, St Peter's Ward. I'll now hand over to the planning officer to present this item.
Thank you very much, Chairman. So this application is for the demolition of the existing buildings on the site and the erection of a 4-storey building containing 44 flats with associated undercroft parking and amenity spaces. This application is presented to the committee this evening in order to give members a further opportunity to consider redevelopment of this site that has been before them previously. Some of you may remember who were sitting on the committee in April last year that this application was presented at that time to you and went through with a recommendation of refusal. So, broadly, the site is located at the northeastern corner of the junction between Church Road and Manor Road. So you've got Manor Road running along here, Church Road here, and you can just in the corner of this see the entrance into the Manor Trading Estate. So the site is currently occupied by a number of semi-detached bungalows. You've got 4 semi-detached bungalows here. You've also got 9 flats which are located on the ground floor and above the business premises here, and you also have a car repair garage, a taxi office and a tanning studio on the site. If we zoom out a little bit, you can get a bit of a wider view of the site. To the east of the site, you've got more commercial buildings and the entrance into Manor Trading Estate here, with all commercial uses along the frontage of Church Road. To the south, you've got the Zach Wilshire pub. Over to the other corner of the junction, you've got the petrol station. And then to the west of the site, you've got commercial uses at ground floor with flats above. And then, as well as those, you've got residential development all around, sort of spread out around the site. So, the applicant seeks permission to construct 44 flats, of which 19 will be 1-bedroom, 22 will be 2-bedroom, and 3 will be 3-bedroom flats. There will be undercroft parking with 52 parking spaces for residents and 6 visitor spaces. No affordable housing provision is proposed as part of this proposal. Now, I've already touched on it briefly, but members may recall that when this was last presented to the committee, it was presented with a recommendation of refusal for the 44 flats and undercroft parking that was presented to them. That application was reviewed for 5 reasons. That was broadly the height, mass and setting of the building, meaning that it was viewed as being obtrusive and dominant. The building was thought to result in overshadowing to the bungalow to the north of the site, located here. The proposal failed to make a contribution towards affordable housing. The proposed surface water drainage scheme used inappropriate figures for the modelling and couldn't guarantee flooding would not increase elsewhere. And the proposed development didn't make adequate provision for electric vehicle charging. It's therefore imperative this evening, and in the report before you, that we assessed whether those previous reasons for refusal had been overcome, together with any new reasons that have been created in the process of overcoming those original reasons for refusal. So I'll quickly run you through the plans, and I'll then also do a comparison side by side of the previous schemes to this so that you can see what has changed as part of the proposal. So this is the proposed site plan and ground floor plan. You can see the proposed vehicular exit of the site onto Manor Road here, and you've got a vehicular entrance and exit onto Church Road here with a large number of car parking spaces. You've got cycle storage, bin stores, some more cycle storage here, and you've got 3 visitor spaces proposed here and 3 visitor spaces proposed here as well. Turning to the floor plans, I appreciate that may be a little bit difficult to see due to the scale on the screen. However, broadly they follow the same pattern of the first floor would have a green roof over much of the existing the proposed undercroft parking, and there would be flats which would have a view out over this green roof, and that continues up with flats similar scale form with a slightly reduced form as the building gets smaller towards the top, and then on the top floor there is proposed to be a roof terrace as well. So here you can see the elevations of the proposal in the street scene. So you can see the existing sort of street scene here looking along Church Road. So you've got the flats on the corner of the junction with the shops underneath, the existing bungalows, commercial premises here, and you can see what that would look like with the proposed block of flats there. And you can also see along Manor Road what the proposal would look like. Undeniably from that, there is a change. It would be different, but different isn't necessarily always bad. So this is a close-up version of the elevations, and you can see particularly evident in this image here and also the image here of the street scene that previously the development was considered to result in overshadowing to this bungalow to the north. There has in effect been a stepping of the section of the proposal nearest this dwelling, which is considered to reduce the level of overshadowing that might have occurred to that bungalow. So I'll quickly run through some of the other drawings. This is a comparison of the current proposal at the top and the previous proposal at the bottom. You can see that the spacing in between these front projections has been increased in order to reduce the appeared massing of the proposal. And you can see here again, there's been, compared to what was previously, where there was a lot more built form in this section of the development, it has been reduced to reduce that impact. And again, you can see here, there's green roof proposed here, where there was none previously, to propose a bit more of a setback from the proposal. And here is a comparison of the elevations before of the previous scheme and the current proposal. So the height, mass and setting of the block have changed slightly in the fact that there is increased spacing between those front projections, as I've already outlined, and that somewhat reduces the lateral mass. However, a ground floor extension located here now exists where previously there was none, and this does have an impact on the setting. As it extends the site now, the proposed development extends up to the eastern boundary of the site. I'll move on, but I will circle back to that point later. A previous reason for refusal on the lack of affordable housing hinged on the lawfulness of the existing flats on site. The council only had record for 2 of the flats, not 9, and this created disparity in the land value when calculating the viability. The applicant has, over the course of the last year, submitted sufficient evidence necessary to confirm the lawfulness of those flats, of all 9 of those flats. And certificates of lawfulness have been granted confirming this, and those are set out on page 3 of the report before you this evening. After this, an amended viability assessment has been undertaken by the applicant, and this has been independently assessed and ratified by our own viability consultant, and this confirms that the development is not viable to provide any affordable housing contribution. There is therefore no objection to the proposal on this basis. The flooding reason has also been overcome, with new details provided and the lead local flood authority raising no objection subject to appropriate conditions. Whilst some details have been provided to provide 6 electric vehicle charging points to serve 12 spaces, it is considered that this provision is unsatisfactory given the number of flats and the number of proposed vehicles that would likely be at the site. However, it is considered that a condition could satisfactorily overcome this issue by requiring each space to have access to an EV charging point. This is condition 21. Turning to other aspects of the proposal, living conditions of occupants and neighbours are considered to be satisfactory, subject to conditions. Parking is provided at a rate of 1.18 spaces per flat, which excludes the visitor spaces, of which there are 6. And this is considered to be in line with the current practices and past practices for flatted development within the borough. It's important to note that there's been an objection received from the Essex County Council Waste and Minerals to the proposal. This relates to the proposal's potential to detrimentally impact on nearby businesses. In this instance, it's protected waste sites that Essex County Council are concerned about. This is set out in paragraph 193 of the MPPF, but essentially the principle, the agent of change principle, originates from the Ministry of Sound in London, where a block of flats was built next door. Once residents moved in, they complained about the Ministry of Sound that had been there, and it was fought in the courts that it was not the fault of the Ministry of Sound that inadequate sound insulation had been put in. So the agent of change principle is basically there to prevent harm to businesses or land uses that were there first. So any harm or mitigation should not be their responsibility. Essex County Council Waste and Minerals are concerned with a number of protected waste facilities on Manor Trading Estate as set out in the report, one of them being Benfleet Scrap, but there is also a car breakers and a skip yard as well. And they can... and they say that these would be adversely impacted by the proposal. To contest this, the applicant and their agent have undertaken a noise impact assessment and also undertaken a waste infrastructure impact assessment at the request of Essex County Council. Despite this, Essex County Council considered that the residents would still experience an unacceptable noise unless they kept their windows closed, and that blame, they are hesitant and consider, could be pointed towards the protected waste sites. However, we've consulted a specialist acoustician employed by Environmental Health who considers that the noise monitoring undertaken illustrates that the dominant noise sources are commercial traffic and that of traffic during rush hour in the morning and in the evening, based on the noise monitoring that was undertaken, with the highest peaks during the morning and evening rush hour. On this basis, and being mindful to the agent of change principle, officers consider that no objection should be raised to the proposal on this basis. So, in conclusion, I previously mentioned that some concern existed, as it did with the previous scheme, regarding the lateral massing, dominance and setting of the proposal. However, this has been improved. It's still not ideal, but it has been improved. There are benefits of the proposal, which would include the provision of an additional 31 units of residential development on a previously developed site, which along with the presumption in favour of sustainable development are considered to outweigh the marginal harm from the proposal, and the application is recommended for approval before you this evening. I will take a moment to highlight that a complaint has been received from a member of the public that the agenda for this item was not published within the correct statutory timeframes, which require that reports are published 5 clear working days before this meeting. This report was published on Monday the 11th of March on the Council's Committee Management Information System, which is known as CMIS, and was publicly available on the Council's website on this date. This allows for the statutory requirement for 5 clear days, and the correct timeframes and legal obligations have been followed in this regard. So I will hand back over to you, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Mr. Green, would you like to take your place at the microphone? Thank you very much. Mr. Green, you have 3 minutes.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, members. As you're all aware, this is a reapplication for the site. Stephen has gone into great detail what we've gone over and amended to mitigate the concerns that was raised by the committee members. We believe we've addressed these. Flooding has been looked at and considered and approved by Essex County Council. We'll be using an attenuation tank, and it's been made larger and the rates have been adjusted. The building has been also reduced in height and scale to the rear where there was an issue with overshadowing. We put forward a sunlight study which informed the reduction of the building and showed that there's no adverse shadowing of the building to the rear on Manor Road. We further highlighted and reduced the mass and bulk of the building to the front. These are actually log-ins at the front, so they're actually kind of enclosed balconies which are going to provide decent living space and an environment for people along with the other flats as well. So what we try to do is create decent homes and places for people on brownfield site rather than eating into the green belt. I hope we've acted positively, looked and taken on board the planner's comments, and we've looked and addressed the issues that was needed. I hope you can approve this and add to our stock in Benfleet rather than eating into the green belt. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ward Member for St Peter's Ward, Councillor Michael Dixon, would you please like to make your statement, please?
I stood in St Peter's Ward with a pledge. I stood in St Peter's Ward with a pledge to protect as much of our green belt as possible. Glebelands, Jopmans, Daws, Heath. I may not succeed, we may not succeed, but this was my pledge to this borough. I do not want more building in this borough, including flats, because we don't have the infrastructure. But I remind you, this is not the option for this SIP-run council, as we are obliged by central government to enable building. On Sunday, as your ward councillor for St Peter's, I was placing copies of tree preservation orders on land in St Peter's, close to Robert Drake School. The developer has openly told a resident he intends to flatten, not the first in this area wanting to destroy our green belt. But I would like to remind everyone on DMC the recommendation of Officers Night is approval of this application on Church Road. I also note this was initially refused and they've had an option to go straight to appeal. Straight to appeal on a brownfield site, the Conservatives run central government, and specifically Michael Gove has informed the Borough they need to utilise to meet the housing needs. But unlike many of the larger developers who have no links to this borough, he has decided to work with the office on the points raised for refusal, and every single one of these has been addressed. This is the local developer, not someone outside the borough. The developer has local companies, he cares about the community, and already has flats in the area that are well maintained. The pros has EV charging points and future-proof by fully ducted for upgrades, Stephen. I also note the development has 58 parking spaces for 44 flats, above the national average. For anyone not aware, this site currently has 9 flats, 3 commercial buildings. The site is on the main road with bus routes, local amenities, and will benefit local trade. This site will have 1 and 2 and 3 bedroom dwellings and a price range that should benefit the younger generation, young people who cannot afford the highly profitable 4 and 5 bedroom, £750,000 houses that many developers want to build. Developers are encouraged by the lack of progress over many years by the previous administration, and their plan eventually they agreed not fit for purpose, a plan that would have destroyed vast areas of our greenbelt. This is a brownfield site. So you on DMC have a conundrum. Protect the greenbelt by approving this development. Replacing the number of homes with houses will require acres of land, or refuse this site, or refuse the use of this brownfield site and effectively invite Michael Gove to intervene. Yes, we need to develop larger brownfield sites with affordable housing and bungalows, but we don't yet have those plans on offer. We need to deliver homes. As you decide, remember the previous administration approved flats on Church Road, Bread and Cheese Hill and Dell's Taylors, near to houses. If you vote against this proposal, remember to tell residents in May that your policy is no building, and hence Michael Gove is likely to put this borough in special measures and make it a concrete jungle. If requesting approval...
Could I just ask you to sum up, please, if you may?
If requesting approval makes me unpopular, so be it. But I remind you, this is brownfield, not greenbelt. It was already hard stand. It has been an honour to serve St Peter's Ward this year. I may not get re-elected after standing tonight, but my pledge on the doorstep was to support utilising the brownfield sites and save our greenbelt. And that's how I stand tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Do members have any questions for the planning officer about this planning application? Please note this is a member's opportunity to seek clarification from the planning officer on any matters they are unclear of regarding the application. Members should refrain from making statements. Those should be expressed in the debate section of the meeting. Councillor Skipp.
Thank you, Chairman. I've just one question through you, Chair, to Mr Garner. You referred to the 58 parking spaces on this new proposal. How does that compare with the previous proposal, please?
If you just bear with me, I can find that information. So the previous proposal proposed 51 spaces.
Councillor Thornton.
Yes, looking at the parking pictures, are some of the parking spaces blocked by another parking space?
Yes, some of the parking spaces are tandem spaces, so you've got a number of tandem spaces here. One of the conditions proposed on the recommendation this evening is the requirement to submit a parking allocation plan, with the idea being that obviously those parking spaces would need to be allocated to the same flat in order to avoid parking conflict, and also that those tandem spaces be allocated to the larger flats which are likely to have more cars.
Councillor Gregg.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Looking at that, the way the parking's laid out there, is there any restrictions on electric vehicles parking down there? Because being an ex-fire officer, having seen that and knowing the problems they've got with electric vehicles, if an electric vehicle went up down there, you would have all sorts of problems.
Under planning regulations law, there's no objection to it. Safety matters would come under other legislation that's not part of the planning process.
Councillor Lillis.
Thank you, Chair. Steve, page 8, 10.9, if I could ask what existing provision there is for parking at the 9 flats currently on the proposed development site. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me just find the aerial. So the existing flats are located at ground floor level and above here. There is the potential for a vehicle. I'm afraid I don't have a street view here, so sorry I can't show you in any more detail. There is potential for a space here, and a number of cars, as you can sort of make out there, do park on the pavement, although that is not allocated spaces. And there are a number of, in front of a gate here, which gates off the garage vehicle repair use. There are a number of laid out spaces. However, I'm not aware that any of those are allocated spaces to the flats, the existing flats.
Councillor Raycott.
Thank you, Chair. I think I can remember going on the site visit last year to this site.
Yeah.
Am I correct in saying that 3 bungalows are going to be demolished to make this a brownfield site?
So there's 4 bungalows,
4 bungalows.
2 pairs of semis.
And the other thing was about this, what Councillor has just spoken about, the car parking. Does the car parking, if it's having electric vehicles in it, conform to the current standards for underground parking for electric cars? And I believe Essex County Council have even got their own standard for parking bays for electric vehicles in underground car parks.
So the current adopted parking standards, which are the Essex parking standards, which were adopted in 2010, it require parking spaces to be 2.9 metres by 5.5 metres wide. The proposal meets those standards. As far as specific requirements and standards for underground or undercroft parking, the council doesn't have any adopted specific standards in that regard, so we refer to the adopted Essex parking standards.
Councillor Thornton.
Thank you. Going back to the tandem parking, if this is going to be allocated per flat, and these flats are 2 and 3 bedroomed, so attracting families, if the 2 parents have to come down to shunt the cars, we're leaving children. I know this is not material planning, but we're leaving children alone in the flat while they come down to shift them. Is that correct?
How occupants of the flats would utilise the spaces is a matter for them. It's not something that that would be considered.
Councillor Sage.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one thing I'm concerned about, page 5, 9.3. Anglian Water, the surface water strategy submitted with the application is unacceptable. Has this now been rectified? Thank you.
So the consultation response from Anglian Water says that as submitted, this is unacceptable. However, that a condition is recommended if the permission is approved to allow for the submission, approval and implementation of a surface water management scheme. One of the conditions in the report before you this evening is the recommended condition to require that information to be submitted, approved and then subsequently implemented.
Councillor Lillis.
Thank you, Chair. Page 9, 10.12. The report refers to an existing adjacent block of flats to the western side of Manor Road, which I think you brought up on one of those pictures earlier on, Steve. How many flats are in this development and how many stories are there in the building as well? Thank you.
Not a problem. So I believe the block of flats you're referring to is this block directly opposite on Manor Road. In this specific row here, I believe there to be approximately 13 to 15 flats located here. and they are over 4 stories, which includes ground floor commercial uses with 3 stories of residential above.
Councillor Hadleigh.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Stephen, could you tell me how much higher this new block is to Rosebery Court next door?
Let me find the street scene. So you can see here the street scene. I don't have an exact measurement that I can give you at the moment. However, yeah, I don't have an exact measurement that I can give you right now. However, based on the street scene, it's looking at somewhere between 2 and 3 metres.
Councillor Thornton.
Yes, we have the presumption in favour of sustainable development. Can you explain exactly what sustainable development means, please? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Hang on a sec. Where's mine? So the presumption in favour of sustainable development obviously hinges on it being sustainable development. Sustainable development would be development that meets local requirements, policies, adopted supplementary documents. For instance, as far as transport is concerned, it's considered to meet the current practices of the council where it comes to providing car parking. It is in a sustainable location. It's got it's right on top of bus routes. It's got a small parade of local shops and easy access to larger areas. Sustainable is a bit of a, I'd say, perhaps a catch-all term. Yes, it can be viewed that way. This development is proposed to be built in line with modern standards and above that in certain situations when it comes to noise and light into the dwellings. And broadly, when looking at everything, comparing it to all our local policies, it's considered that because it complies with those policies, subject to conditions in places, that represents a sustainable, good quality form of development that could be built and would be justified in being approved going forward.
I'm going to move on to the debate section. We've had quite a long list of questions. So the Planning Officer's recommendation is that planning permission be granted subject to the conditions and informative set out on pages 20 to 28 of the report. For the purposes of debate, I move the recommendation. Councillor Gregg, as Vice Chairman, would you second that motion?
I accept that motion.
Thank you very much. This is the debate section, so I'll remind everyone you can speak once. Councillor Savage.
I think we need to be fully aware of one of the points that Councillor Michael Dixon brought up, and that's this, view of government with respect to our obligations to develop where we can develop. We've just turned down a green belt application for 170 odd houses. Just up the road from there, we had Gleeblands, which I think was 160 something houses. If we're not going to build on green belt, and we're not going to build on brownfield, say for example, if you choose to turn this down, where are we going to build? Are we going to put our spokes down at Dauntless, are we? Because, ultimately, whilst it looks like a large development, we are in need of these properties. As I said earlier, my daughter's just bought a place out of Borough because she couldn't find anything in Castle Point. And that's terrible for our young residents. And I didn't want her coming out of Borough, but unfortunately she couldn't find anything. So as it pains me, and it does pain me because it is quite an overbearing building, I would have to go with the recommendation.
Councillor Lillis.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with everything that Councillor Savage has just said. I think it's fair to say that nothing is ever straightforward that comes before us on this committee. But zero house building is not an option for this borough. And to pretend otherwise is misleading members of the public. I doubt there will ever be a brownfield application at DMC that is ever deemed to be perfect and that is universally popular. but the fact is that we do need small dwellings in our borough. This application provides a good mix of 1, 2 and some 3 bedroom flats. And it should be abundantly clear to everyone that the precedent of providing 1 for 1, that is 1 parking space per dwelling, was set by the previous administration. I could give you some examples of that, but I think I've spoken enough this evening. But there are many examples since 2013 where developments have been erected in our borough, flatted developments, where the recommendation is for a large number of parking spaces, but the reality was that much less was granted. So the precedent has been set. Much of our law is based on precedent. It does pain me, but I will be supporting this application. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Skipp.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I've heard what the previous speakers have said, and I do understand their sentiments in why they feel this site should be developed. And I have always supported development on brownfield sites where it's appropriate, and that has got to be the way forward. And this is why we could try and save that green belt as we did in the previous application. The problem I have is although there is an improvement in the parking spaces, there's still 22 spaces deficient in the parking. Now the argument is obviously it's near bus routes, etc., and local facilities. People still want to use their cars, whether it's in the bus route or not. So I find that that's a difficult one for me to do. So although I accept that this is in the right space, okay, there's no affordable housing, which is what we know we do need in our borough to help support the youngsters into flatter development, where appropriate. So I don't think that would help in almost that situation. It may help, obviously, people migrating into the borough from other areas who can afford to pay those prices, but it doesn't help our residents. So on balance, I think I'm going to have to go against Elsa's recommendation on this occasion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Skipp. Councillor Thornton.
Yes. A lot is made about the parking, and these ones that you're talking about that we've allowed previously have got a legacy of problems that have been left behind. Now, precedent does count, but there's plenty of precedent on appeal that also goes the other way. And also, it's in our gift as a council to actually set a supplementary planning document for parking that could make the difference. For instance, Malden says, in recognition that restricting car parking did not result in a shift away from car use and therefore car ownership, national policy has moved away from restricting car parking towards providing adequate parking provision. Now, they voted against having a supplementary planning document that addressed parking at the last full council, and we are where we are because of that. I can't support this because once again it hasn't made adequate provision for the parking. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Would anyone else like to speak? Councillor Raycott.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for letting me speak again. Looking at the drawings there, I don't think I would be all that happy if I lived opposite this block of flats with the shape of it. Well, as far as I can remember, it's not a very wide road what it's in. I mean, 2 cars can pass each other, but it doesn't really give you much space. I feel that's possibly a good idea, but the design isn't quite right regarding local residents who are going to look onto it. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Savage.
I think we've got to put this into perspective a little bit. The only houses in effect that would be affected by this development are potentially the ones on Manor Road to the north of that building. It's not a particularly pretty junction as it is at the moment. Let's be honest, you've got a 60s built pub, a petrol station and some not particularly great looking flats on the opposite corner. So in my own opinion, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. I don't think it's a particularly nice block of flats compared to, say, Del Taylor's or someone like that. But ultimately, we're talking about provision of dwellings for people in our borough. Now, the argument about affordable housing, it doesn't stack up for me, because ultimately, I think my daughter would have had more chance of buying one of those than she would have buying a $750,000 house on Solby Farm. So, you know, you've got to put this into perspective, I feel. You know, we are in desperate need of dwellings in this borough. We don't want to build on our green belt. We've made that statement. You know, as a borough, our residents have made that statement. You know, and I go back to my original statement. If we don't build on green belt, we've got to start utilising our brownfield sites. So I'm sorry, it don't stack up to me.
I have been fairly flexible tonight, and obviously there's quite an interesting debate going on, but I'm going to ask if there is. I'll take one more statement, and then I think we should go to the vote. Okay, let's go to the vote. Members, the motion before you is for approval. May I have a show of hands, please? Those for the motion. Those against the motion? And there are no abstentions. The motion is carried and the application is approved, subject to the conditions and informatives set out in the report. Item 7 is first Hadleigh, 35 London Road, Benfleet. I'll now hand over to the planning officer to present this item.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and I'll keep this one nice and short and sweet. I appreciate you've all heard enough of me speaking this evening. So this application is being presented to the Development Management Committee this evening following a successful call-in by Councillor Knott due to concerns about the impact of the proposal on residential amenity of neighbouring properties due to excessive noise and disturbance. This application is a variation of condition application, which is a type of application which seeks to amend a condition previously imposed on a site. In consideration of these types of applications, it is only the specific conditions which are proposed to be amended which can be considered, as these are the subject matter of the application. So, I'll show you quickly here. This is the site in question. I'm sure many of you will be familiar with this site. It is located on Hadleigh roundabout just here, and you've got the bus depot here with an entrance here. There is also a vehicular entrance and exit here, and you've got the bus lay-by here on the A13. Zooming out a little bit more, you can get a bit of a better understanding. You've got the Magnet Kitchen showroom here. You've got Arcadian Gardens here, which is a residential street, and you've got Hall Crescent along here as well. And you've got a couple of other nearby commercial and non-residential uses here. So, in 2002, permission was granted for alterations at the bus depot, subject to a condition, which is condition 3, which states, prior to the installation of the fuel tank hereby approved, 17 car parking spaces shall be provided adjacent to the northern boundary of the site. Now, I will quickly get those up for you. So, this is the original plan, and those 17 spaces are the ones along here. The condition goes on to say, in the area hatched on the approved plan herewith, which I've just showed you, returned and shall be permanently marked out and maintained in a manner conducive to the future use of such spaces for the parking of staff vehicles. Such an area shall not be used for the parking, standing, storage or repair of buses or other service vehicles, and access thereto shall be maintained free of obstruction at all times. It's that condition that's sought to be varied this evening. Last year, a complaint was received by the planning department that there was a lack of on-site parking and that condition 3 was not being adhered to, and buses were parking in this area instead of staff vehicles parking there. This scheme, which is proposed here this evening, seeks to alter the condition to improve that situation. And it would alter the approved parking layout, which I previously showed you, which had 17 spaces all along that back boundary, which measured approximately 2.4 metres by 4.8 metres in size, and replace those with 17 spaces, so the same number of spaces, with a size of 2.9 metres by 5 metres, which is a more usable space suitable for modern cars. In the scheme of things, ultimately, this application would replace 17 small spaces with 17 larger, more usable spaces. And this is considered to provide a degree of betterment, which when combined with proposed condition 2 to implement, and lay out the proposed parking would provide a usable parking area for staff only and not buses. It is for this reason that the application is recommended for approval before you this evening. You will note from the late letter schedule in front of you that an additional 15 late representations to this item have been received. These are set out on the schedule and addressed before you this evening on that schedule. Some of those items have already been addressed and have been raised in the original report, and some have not, but those have been addressed before you this evening, but these do not impact on the recommendation this evening. So therefore, the application is recommended for approval before you this evening. And I'll hand back to you, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Ward Member for the Victoria Ward, Councillor John Knott, would you like to please make your statement? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I promise I'll try and keep with my 3 minutes.
The clock is ticking.
Okay. Members, on the face of things, this application before you is straightforward. As Stephen's explained, it's just moving some car spaces, making them a bit wider. And you may wonder why I've called it in, so I'm going to give you some explanation. This application was submitted following the council beginning the first stages of enforcement action, which you've heard. By actually bringing in this application, it's paused the enforcement procedure. So for many years, the buses have been parking close to the rear garden, fences and properties in Arcadian Gardens in spaces designated for staff parking. This has caused noise pollution, diesel pollution, and loss of privacy to the people living in these properties that you can see on the map that back onto those spaces. It's also resulted in parking spaces for staff not being available because buses are parked in there. And that's contributed to parking problems in part in the nearby roads, including Arcadian Gardens. As we've heard, there are planning conditions prohibiting buses parking in these spaces from 2002. And I've got some photos here, Mr. Chairman, which if I may pass to the committee in a second so they can see, if that's in order.
No, that wouldn't be appropriate.
Okay. Residents of Arcadian Gardens have sought help in the past from their local councillors and I believe possibly the MP, but for whatever reason, councillors in the past do not appear to have pushed for enforcement in relation to the breaches of planning conditions. Quite honestly, in my view, they've been let down. So since last summer, I and Councillor Gibson have sought to resolve the issue by firstly visiting the manager of the bus depot, trying to resolve it informally. That failed. So more recently, the council have instigated at our request enforcement procedure. By submitting this condition of application before you, the first bus have been able to pause enforcement actions I've explained. I've spoken with Stephen Garner since calling in, and he's So I spoke to Stephen Garner and he advised that the original application has been allowed to be breached for so long, for probably maybe 20 years, without enforcement. It's extremely likely that if it proceeded and continued to court, the court would find against the council. So following our conversation, Stephen Garner has agreed to put some conditions on to this application, which you've got in front of you tonight, and that's what I'm actually pleading to you to accept those conditions. See, if you do agree to those new conditions, they mirror virtually the same as the original ones, 2002. The difference being these will be new conditions, brand new, not previously breached over a long period of time. And if First Bus then now continue to park buses in those bays overlooking the gardens, it's an eyesore. The bus is just literally, you look out your garden, the bus is there. If they continue to do it, I and Councillor Gibson will request enforcement immediately. We've asked the residents to let us know. So it's a different situation. If you agree to those applications or the variations, it will give us an opportunity now to actually do for the people in Arcadian Gardens what hasn't been done for the last 20 years. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Do members, thanks ladies and gents, do members have any questions for the planning officer about this planning application? Please note it's questions and not statements. Those are for the second part of this meeting. Councillor Lillis.
I think actually Councillor Savage had his hand up first. You happy for me to go first? Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Steve, can you confirm that allocating this area for 17 parking spaces will prevent buses from parking close to the boundary and that if the new conditions are breached, they will definitely be enforced by officers so that residents don't have to continue to endure what they have done seemingly for many years. Thank you.
So, as I mentioned briefly, the condition that is proposed as part of this application is to require that these parking spaces are laid out within 3 months of the date of permission being granted, should members grant it this evening, and be marked out and shown as approved on this plan, and then that they will be retained permanently and solely for the use of staff and visitor parking. Now, in the rare occasion that a staff or visitor might drive a bus, that could arguably fall within the remit of that condition. However, I think that is very unlikely, and the majority of parking would be visitors and staff arriving in their own cars. The condition specifically states that these parking spaces shall be used for no other purpose without the consent of the council. With that condition, when the permission is implemented, that provides a strong starting point and case for enforcement action, whereas because the breach has gone on for a long period of time, it is difficult to ascertain, and there's also time limits for when enforcement action can be taken in enforcing the conditions. So this would provide a new condition that would be enforceable, and on receipt of complaints we'd need evidence, so photographs of a bus parking there, then we would be able to take action and issue breach of conditions notices, enforcement notices, in order to secure that that area is utilised for staff parking.
Councillor Savage.
Stephen, with our enforcement officer gainfully employed, could we not put a condition on that does a spot check of this particular depot? I mean, the photograph that you shown earlier actually shows buses parked all the way along the edge of there. So, you know, surely it's in our remit to utilise our enforcement officer and do a random spot check of that particular site.
Well, it's not strictly a matter for this planning application. It's something that could be done. However, it's a question of resourcing.
I suppose the question is can we not put a condition on there that we have a periodic check of that particular site to make sure that those conditions are met?
There would be no requirement for a periodic check because the site is relatively open. We could drive by and see it, and also under planning law, for non-residential sites we have powers of entry anyway, so we could always enter the site to inspect.
Councillor Thornton.
Yes, there's been an ongoing problem with on-street parking of the workers because of the buses using. So this seems really good, but what's going to happen to the buses that are parking there now? Have they reduced the buses that they've got, or is there somewhere else for the buses to be parking? I don't quite understand, because we've got a problem with buses that park periodically outside of the depot as well. So has there been a reduction in the buses?
Insofar as the number of buses, I don't know. Pretty much what is before you this evening, what I've presented is the information that I know about the number of buses. If buses are parking on the road, that's a Essex Highways matter. It's not something that we can control. As far as what they're doing with the existing buses, I know that they've got quite a large area round here, which, on speaking to the depot manager when I conducted a site visit, was perhaps not being utilised to its full extent. There's also large areas of inside workshops which could also be used for the buses, but ultimately what's happening with the buses that are there at the moment, I don't know.
Councillor Lillis.
Thank you, Chair. Steve, I note the serious accusation in 7.2, page 4. The present administration was elected on a ticket of transparency and accountability. Would you care to reiterate the council's response, just for the public record, please? Thank you.
Sorry, which bullet was that again?
So page 4, right at the very, very top.
Okay.
And then you've got your comment there under. Thank you, Steve.
All I'll say is that the only financial transaction that has happened in this is the payment of the application fee. There has been no other agreement been made with the bus depot It has purely been the information that has been submitted with this application. So in the interest of being transparent, that is the only exchanges that have happened and the only financial monetary figures that have exchanged hands.
Are there any other questions? The planning officer's recommendation is that planning permission be approved, subject to the conditions and informatives set out on pages 6 and 7. For the purposes of debate, I move the recommendation. Councillor Gregg, as Vice Chairman, will you second the motion?
I second the motion.
Please note that members should really only speak once during the debate section of this meeting. Who would like to speak first? Councillor Lillis.
Why not? Thank you, Chair. I'm very surprised and disappointed that the issues associated with this application have not been enforced before now. That is, until Councillors Warren Gibson and Councillors John Knott have got involved. And I thank them for their sterling effort with officers on behalf of the affected residents. And I will most certainly be voting in favour of the application. Thank you.
Would anyone else like to speak? Members, the motion before you is for approval. May I have a show of hands, please? Those for the motion. And that's unanimous. The motion is carried and the application is approved, subject to the conditions and informatives set out in the report. Thank you, members. That concludes the business for this evening. This meeting closed at 8:45. Safe journey home, everyone.